I paid for my brother's university and supported him financially for 8 years, believing he needed it. I discovered he has his own apartment, investments and savings because he left his phone at my house and I saw a bank notification. There are people who let you see exactly what they want you to see, who build a version of their reality specifically calibrated to produce in you the response they need from you. Not because they're evil in the abstract sense, but because at some point they made the decision that your generosity was more comfortable than their independence. And once that decision was made, they sustained it with the dedication of someone who has built a system that works and has no incentive to change it. I was someone's system for 8 years. Someone was my brother, and I discovered it because he forgot his phone at my house on a Sunday afternoon, and a notification from his banking app lit up on the screen while I was holding it to bring it to the table for him. My name is Mariana. I am 37 years old. I am a director of operations at a logistics company. I have lived alone for 5 years, and for most of my adult life, I have operated with the conviction that family supports each other. That when someone in your family needs help, the help exists because you are there. That conviction is not wrong in itself. What is wrong is applying it without verifying whether the need is real. I did not verify. For 8 years I trusted because he was my brother and because trusting was what older sisters who cared about their families did. That trust cost me what it cost me, and I learned what I learned, and this is that story. My brother's name is Rodrigo. He is 32 years old, 5 years younger than me. We grew up in a family of moderate means where money never overflowed, but never ran critically short. My parents worked with the dedication of people who want to give their children what they themselves did not have, and in that process my brother and I learned, or should have learned, that things cost effort. When the time for university came, I was already working and had 2 years of work experience and a salary that allowed me to help. Rodrigo wanted to study industrial design at a private university that was good, but whose tuition my parents could not cover completely. I told him I would put in the difference. He did not ask me for it. I offered it. That distinction matters because for a long time I used it to feel good about the decision. To tell myself it was a free choice I had made from love and not a response to manipulation. The distinction matters less than I thought. The first 2 years were what I expected them to be. Rodrigo studied. He worked part-time at something small. I paid the tuition and gave him a monthly allowance for transportation and food that was reasonable for what a student needs. It was an arrangement that made sense and that I maintained with the satisfaction of someone who is doing something concrete and useful for someone they love. In the 3rd year, the extras started. An emergency with the computer he needed for his design projects. A problem with his living situation that required urgent moving. An additional course not covered in the tuition but important for his development. Reasonable emergencies. Reasonable amounts. Always with detailed explanations that made saying no feel like abandonment. I said yes. I always said yes. He graduated 5 years ago. That moment should have been the natural end of the financial support. Or at least the transition towards something different where he built his independence and my role changed from support to occasional backup. That did not happen. What happened was that the pattern of emergencies that had started in the 3rd year of university did not disappear with graduation. It mutated. Student emergencies became new graduate emergencies. The job that was slow to arrive, the client who did not pay, the project that fell through, the complicated month while he was stabilizing. And then into professional building emergencies, the opportunity that required investment, the equipment he needed to update, the moment when he was about to take off but needed a bridge. There was always a bridge. I was always the bridge. In 8 years of sustained support and periodic emergencies, the total amount was a figure that when I added it up for the first time, which was after I saw the notification on his phone and before talking to him, required me to sit down and let it settle for a moment before continuing to look at it. I'm not going to say the exact figure because it is not the central point of the story and because numbers in these situations tend to become the focus when the focus should be elsewhere. What I will say is that it was enough to have significantly changed my own life options in those 8 years. The trip I did not take. The postgraduate course I postponed. The savings cushion that never reached where I wanted it to reach. I did not think of it that way at the time. At the time, he was my brother, and the help was the help. but when I saw it all together, it was different. He forgot the phone on a Sunday. He had come for lunch. A normal visit of the kind we had every 2 or 3 weeks, where I cooked something, we ate, talked about everyday things, and then he left. He left, and 20 minutes later, I found his phone on the couch. I picked it up to bring to the table and call him to come back for it. At that moment, the notification arrived. It was from his banking app. The text visible on the lock screen said, "Your variable income fund investment has generated returns this month." I stayed with the phone in my hand. Investment. Variable income fund. Rodrigo, who 3 weeks earlier had asked me for money because he had a complicated month with clients and could not cover his rent, had an investment in a variable income fund generating returns. I called him from my own phone. When he answered, I told him he had forgotten his phone and that he could come get it or I could bring it to him. He told me he was on his way. He arrived 15 minutes later. I gave him the phone. I said nothing about the notification. I watched him leave, and I sat with what I had just seen and with the questions that those 12 words had opened in a way that could not be closed. I did not act immediately. I took 2 weeks, not from paralysis, from investigation, not of Rodrigo's phone, which I never would have gone through even if I could have, because there are lines I do not cross even when I'm looking for answers, but of what I could investigate legitimately with available information. Rodrigo had social media that I followed, and that in those 2 weeks I reviewed with a different attention than I had given it before. What I found when I looked at it that way was a different story from the one he had told me. Photos of an apartment I did not know, not recent, with a date from more than 2 years ago. A tastefully furnished apartment, with plants, with the kind of habitability details you do not put in a place that is temporary. An apartment he had never mentioned to me. I thought he was still living with a roommate in a small place, because that was what he had told me when I had helped him with a move 3 years ago. A comment from a friend on a photo from 1.5 years ago. 2 years in that apartment, and it's still the nicest of all. 2 years. His own apartment. Without telling me anything. While asking me for help with rent. I searched his name in the public property registry, which in my city is accessible online. I found a property registered in his name. Purchased 3 years ago. 1 month after I had given him money for an emergency he had described as critical. I called him and asked him to meet. Not at my house this time. At a neutral cafe. I arrived with a folder. In the folder was the screenshot of the bank notification I had seen on his screen. The screenshots of the apartment photos from his social media. The public property registry. And a sheet with a summary of the financial support I had given him over 8 years. Dates, amounts, stated reason for each one. I put it on the table. I looked at him, and I waited. Rodrigo looked at the folder. He took longer than I expected to say something. When he spoke, he did not deny anything. What he did was something I did not know how to classify at the time, and that over time I have learned to recognize as a specific tactic. He tried to reframe. He told me I had never asked him what his real situation was, that he had asked for help when he had needed it, and that if his situation had improved in some aspects, that did not invalidate that at other moments he had genuinely needed support, that he had been able to buy the apartment partly because he had been able to save because I had supported him in difficult times, that was what families did, that if I had asked, he would have been more transparent, that it was my responsibility to have asked. I listened to him until he finished. I took a moment to respond, because what he had just said was the kind of argument that requires you to stop and dismantle it rather than react to it emotionally. I told him he was right about one thing, that I had not asked with the specificity I would have needed to ask to have the real information, that was true and it was something I had to own. And that nevertheless, that did not change what he had done. That the absence of my question was not an invitation to build a narrative of need that did not correspond with his reality. That he had had in each of those conversations the opportunity to tell me the truth and had chosen not to. That was an active decision, not a passive omission. That the difference between omission and active deception was the difference between me not knowing something and him making sure I did not know it. That what he had done was the second. There was no great resolution in that cafe. There was no apology that felt real. There was no moment of absolute honesty that repaired what had been broken. What there was the silent acknowledgement of two people that something had permanently changed in what they were to each other. I told him I needed time, that I did not know what shape our relationship was going to have in the future. That what I did know was that the financial support was over and that any future conversation about money was going to require a transparency that had not existed before. He left. 7 months have passed. Rodrigo and I have spoken 3 times in that time. Brief conversations. Polite. With the distance of two people who are recalibrating what they are to each other without either of them having finished deciding it. My parents know something happened between us, but not the complete details. Not to protect him, but because putting my parents in the middle of this does not help anyone, and because it is a decision I can make without needing them to validate what I feel. What I am processing in these months is not only the anger. It is something more complicated. It is the review of 8 years of memories with the question of what was real and what was management of my perception. It is the process of separating the brother I know from the person who made those decisions. It is learning to hold both images at the same time without one canceling the other. It is work. It is not finished, but it is moving forward. What I want you to take from this story is not distrust toward your family. Family deserves trust. What deserves review is trust without verification applied indefinitely to situations where the other person has an incentive not to be completely transparent. Asking is not distrusting. Asking is treating the other person as an adult capable of having an honest conversation about their real situation. And if someone in your life interprets your questions as lack of trust or as an attack, that reaction in itself is information. The second thing, the support you give from love is real, even if the need that received it was not completely real. Your generosity is not invalidated because someone took advantage of it. What does change is the information you have to make future decisions. And that information, even if it hurts to obtain, is yours. Use it. If this story touched you, comment. Would you ask a family member for accountability after years of supporting them? Like if you believe asking about someone's real situation is not distrusting, but respecting. Subscribe for more real stories. Share with someone who has been financially supporting a family member and has never verified whether the need is real. Reflection to take with you. Sustained financial support over time deserves periodic honest conversations about the real situation of who receives it. Not as control, but as mutual respect. If those conversations generate discomfort or evasion, that reaction is information worth paying attention to.